Hello, I'm Michael Buerk. Every year, unclaimed estates worth millions of pounds are handed over to long-lost relatives. For some people, it means a knock on the door they'll never forget.
It came as a complete and utter shock. So I thought, oh, lovely, wonderful, whoopee, £1 million, here we come.
Finding forgotten families is the job of the heir hunters. They use genealogy to locate the next of kin who are in line for unexpected windfalls.
Hi, is it Deborah?
Oh, how much money am I going to get?
I was surprised, very surprised.
A visit from the heir hunters can change lives.
The more she told me and the more I looked into it, I thought, oh my God, you know, it's amazing.
Meet up with all of you.
You never know when they might come knocking at your door. Today I'm with the Wigan-based heir hunting firm Estate Research, where the team took on what turned out to be one of the most remarkable cases they'd ever seen. A story of strength and sadness.
The team were passed the case of James Cheetham by the local authority who were keen to find his next of kin. They'd been told that James was born in Wigan in 1943 and had previously worked in the area as a factory machinist. James spent the last years of his life in a care home and died there in September 2015, leaving no will and with no known family. He was a popular resident, but would he have shared any details with the staff there that might help in the search for his heirs?
Even though he was a private man, you know, and he did have his witty side. That was the cheeky chappy, you know, that's that side of him. His little one-liners, they were gems, and I think that's what we missed.
So there were no clues to be gleaned from James's care home, and at Estate Research, the hunt for heirs of his estate had begun. They'd been informed that he had no immediate family, was a bachelor, and had no siblings or nephews or nieces. But all this had to be verified. From James's birth certificate, the team was able to determine who his parents were, the starting point in any research. This would then confirm whether he had brothers or sisters.
So when we're looking for siblings to the deceased, we know that the mother's maiden name was Robinson. Obviously, the father's name was Cheetham. So we look for any birth records with that combination of surnames. The certificate we found here was of Mary Cheetham, born on the 28th of January 1943. And then we then searched through the death records or marriage records to see if she's married. And unfortunately, we discovered that she'd actually passed away when she was very young. And the death certificate's here. She passed away in 1943. So she was the only sibling to James.
Next, the team had to make sure there were no half-blood siblings, who in the eyes of inheritance laws would be next in line to inherit. And straight away, they made a tragic discovery.
So what we would do usually is actually locate the parents' death certificates to make sure there'd been no subsequent remarriage of either parent. And in this particular case, when we got those certificates, we discovered that James Cheetham's mother, Alice, had actually died in a railway crash.
This was a shock for the heir hunters.
Hard to imagine James losing his mother to the crash. It's hard to imagine how it affected him throughout his life.
It turned out that after James's mother's death, his father had gone on to marry a Marjorie Wright. But they had no children of their own. So the next step was to search for aunts and uncles of James. If his mother or father had siblings, these would be the starting point that could lead the team to heirs. They first looked at his mother's side of the family.
So once we'd identified the birth of the deceased mother, Alice Robinson, we knew what her parents were, the maternal grandparents. There was Samuel and Mary. And then we looked on the census record to see if I could identify all of Alice's siblings. And that showed that Samuel and Mary, at that time in 1911, had actually had 4 children.
It turned out that Samuel and Mary had a total of 6 children, including James's mother Alice. But 2 were born after the 1911 census, so Alex had to dig deeper with his research.
1939 register actually lists the whole family together. It shows Robert Robinson, who is a sibling to Alice, who works in the coal mine. There's Joseph, he's also a coal miner. So it looks very much as though Alice's 2 brothers, Joseph and Robert, followed their father's occupation into the coal mines.
Joseph and Robert Robinson were subjected to hard manual labour in the mines, and like so many of their peers, they needed a release at the end of the day when they came above ground. And this, for the miners, usually came in the form of sport.
1913, there's over 1 million people employed in the coal mining industry, and a lot of them are all doing some sort of sport. And it was a social thing as well. You've got colliery football teams, colliery rugby teams, you've got boxing teams, all sorts of sports across the country that have been taken to heart by the mining community.
But Robert and Joseph Robinson chose a different way to unwind after a hard day's graft.
So Robert and Joseph would have finished their day working down the pit, and then it'd be straight down to the wrestling club, to the snake pit, start learning another trade, the trade of wrestling.
Right. Roy Wood has wrestling in his blood, and after taking up the sport from an early age, he now runs the world-famous Snake Pit Wrestling Club, a new guise of Riley's gym where the Robinson brothers used to train. The younger of the 2 brothers, Robert, showed quite a talent for wrestling, so much so that it elevated him out of a life in the mines.
My dad used to talk about Bob Robber when he worked in the mines with him, and when I started wrestling at Riley's gym, he was the #1 wrestler there. Bob always wrestled under the name of Billy Joyce, and he was very, very famous under Billy Joyce.
And with fierce dedication, James Cheetham's uncle Robert soon emerged as a superstar in wrestling, and his skill not only propelled him out of the mines of Wigan, but to world fame and the most coveted title of any wrestler.
Bob was the heavyweight champion, so Lord Mountbatten presented Bob Robertson with his Lord Mountbatten belt. He held it as long as I remember. I think as soon as they brought him out, Bob won it. And it's here, he must have held it when he died. Nobody ever challenged him for it.
We should hopefully be able to maybe...
Martin and the team were hoping that James's uncle Robert's success would help in their search. As he was a celebrity in his time, this could make his descendants easier to locate. If Robert or his siblings had had children, they or their descendants would be the heirs of James Cheetham's estate. Early research revealed that Robert's brother Joseph and his sister May had both died unmarried and with no children. Next, the team began to research his eldest sister Elizabeth, James's aunt.
We're looking to see where we can find the 1939 register to see if that has the family, the descendants of Elizabeth Robinson, who married Mr. Gaskell.
When the team began to go down Elizabeth's family line, they discovered that she'd had 3 children. Her daughter Joan had died in infancy, but when researching May Gaskell, the trail went cold.
We couldn't seem to locate any obvious marriage or death record for her, and obviously this is a problem for us because if we can't complete the research and that stem of the family, obviously we don't know if there are heirs alive or further heirs on that branch of the family.
Straight away, the team hit a massive setback. And hitting a brick wall so early on in the research didn't bode well in the quest to find beneficiaries of James Cheetham's estate.
Each case the heir hunters take on is a voyage of discovery, unwrapping clues one by one, and every decision can lead them closer to or further from the heirs.
In London, senior case manager Amy Moyes and the team at Finders International are getting to grips with a new case just in, where the deceased died just 7 days ago.
This is the case of John Donahe. We received this via the public domain, so we know from the outset it's going to be a competitive one. In this initial stage, it's not too clear for us what sort of estate John Donahe might have. What we can tell, though, is that it looks as though he's probably a property owner.
John was a painter-decorator who lived his whole life in the Leeds area. He was born on the 5th of May 1949 and died in July 2017, aged 68. Leaving no will and with no known heirs, could John's lifelong friend Bernard Capitano provide any clues which might give the team a head start in such a competitive case?
I knew him from when he was born, and then we've just been friends evermore for years. He was an happy-go-lucky child, really, but he was a loner. He didn't bother with anybody, really. He just kept himself to himself, really, you know. But he was a nice chap. And the only really friends he had was people he saw in the pub.
As well as he knew John, Bernard knew of no family of his and unfortunately couldn't shed any light onto his case. At Finders, with no head start on John's file, Amy needs to kick off the search for relatives and ultimately heirs.
I have established that John appears to have passed away a bachelor without having married, without having had children. He also had a younger brother, but he died in infancy. I've also established who I believe to be John's parents as a John Joseph Donahe and Alice Dickinson.
With no obvious next of kin found, the first job is to create John's family tree, whose branches, they hope, will lead them to beneficiaries of his estate.
Right away, the surname Donahe tells me it's probably got Irish connections. We also know that John's mother's maiden name was Dickinson, so although a very English surname, it's also an incredibly common surname. So we know that we've got Irish research to do on one side and probably quite difficult and time-consuming research to do on the other.
OK, Amy. So a competitive case like this one, I'm guessing you're going to have to get your skates on.
We knew that we needed a few certificates in order to confirm we were headed in the right direction, but we couldn't get hold of those as quickly as we wanted to. So we decided to take a risk. The Donahe surname, obviously at first glance, it sounds fairly Irish. So
the clues in the name. Yeah.
We came across a record for a deceased father, and it was an Irish birth, so we sent the information over to our Irish team and asked them to get going with that Donahe family tree in the hopes that it would be correct. The maternal side looked English through and through, so I got on with that research along with other members of the team here whilst we waited for our Irish colleagues to send something through to us.
So both sides of the Irish Sea, you were working on all cylinders?
Absolutely, everyone had their heads down.
The common name of Dickinson to deal with means it's not going to be the easiest of searches. But Amy forges ahead in the hope of finding out if John's mother Alice had any brothers or sisters.
I've taken a look at the 1911 census and I managed to locate John's mother Alice living with her parents who are named Fred and Charlotte. That record tells me that Fred and Charlotte have had 6 children by 1911.
With Alice born in 1909, there's every chance her parents could have gone on to have more children after 1911, who therefore wouldn't have been included in the census. So it's essential that every branch of the family tree is explored.
So I've done a search of the birth indexes post-1911, and I can see that Fred and Charlotte have had 3 further children. So excluding John's mum, Alice, we now know that we've got 8 maternal stems to look into. So I think it's time that I split the research up amongst the rest of the team.
Amy hopes that by dividing research into the common name of Dickinson between colleagues, they'll be able to get to an heir quicker. But there's a problem.
All of the names are looking really quite difficult. They're all plain without a middle name to go with the already difficult surname of Dickinson.
While things are progressing on John's mother's side of the family, Amy's at a standstill with the paternal side. She's waiting for news from her team in Ireland and also for the paperwork she's ordered to come in.
I'm a bit stuck at the moment. I can't do much more without looking at actual certificates.
But on the maternal side, Amy has her first positive lead. She's looking into the stem of the eldest of John's mother Alice's siblings, Harry Dickinson. He was born in 1901, and research revealed that he had an exciting career as a dog trainer at the start of Britain's introduction to greyhound racing. Could being at the forefront of a brand new industry have led to great family wealth?
Greyhound racing started in the UK in 1926 in Manchester. It had been successful in the United States, and an enterprising businessman from there, Charles Munn, decided he'd like to introduce it into Britain. The public loved it. Crowds in London, for example, at the White City, would often reach 25,000 on Saturday night.
This new sport was exciting for the spectators, but risky financially for people like Harry, who decided to get involved from the outset.
He was lucky that the sport really took off and that he would have done well at it. Going back to 46, something like 34 million paying spectators through the course of that year. So it just illustrates how popular the sport was at that time.
John's uncle Harry was involved in greyhound racing in its prime. But in the modern world, its popularity has waned.
In the heyday of the sport, there were 77 licensed tracks, and today there are just over 20.
Although John's uncle Harry's unusual career didn't end up leading to great family wealth, it could be useful in helping the heir hunters with their research. And back in the office, there's some important news just in. John's father, John Joseph Donaghy's death certificate has finally arrived, and it's brought with it some devastating news for Amy and the team. Amy took a gamble trying to get ahead by setting the team in Ireland to work before the certificates had arrived, but it didn't pay off.
It turns out that rather than John Joseph Donahe having been born in Ireland, as we've been led to believe, he was in fact born in Motherwell in Scotland. So it's thrown a spanner in the works, really. We've been looking completely the wrong place for Donahe relatives, and we need to essentially start again with urgent research up in Scotland.
So it's back to the drawing board on John Donahe's paternal family tree. This is not good news on a highly competitive and potentially high-value case.
Every year in Britain, thousands of ordinary people get an unexpected knock on the door from heir hunters.
I had no idea that we had a branch of the family that we knew nothing about.
Over the years, the heir hunters have given fortunes to the heirs that they find. As well as the unexpected windfalls, they also reunite relatives.
The more I looked into it, I thought, oh my God, it's amazing.
There are still hundreds of estates left unclaimed. Listen carefully for the names. If you recognise yours, then one of them could rightfully belong to you.
Today, we've got details of 2 estates on the Government Legal Department's unclaimed estates list. The first case today is that of Janet Bowen. Janet died on the 22nd of December 2009 in Aylesford, Kent, aged 65. She was born illegitimately in Oldham, Greater Manchester, in 1944. Janet married James Henry Bowen on the 25th of July 1969 in Greenwich, London. Janet's mother was called Edith Rigby. She was born in 1905 and died in 1983. Do you know which Bowen family Janet was part of? The next case is that of Ronald Arthur Ladyman. Ronald died on the 22nd of October 2002 in Brighton, East Sussex. He was born on either the 2nd or the 20th of February 1920 in Holborn, London. Ronald was informally adopted by the Ladyman family and died a bachelor. Could you be his relative?
If so, the windfall could be coming your way.
In Wigan, heir hunting firm Estate Research had taken on the case of retired factory worker James Cheetham, also from Wigan. James was living in a care home when he died aged 72 in 2015.
He was a lovely man, wasn't he? Yeah, there was no harm in him. He was a proper nice
He was a gentleman as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
While drawing James's family tree in the search for beneficiaries of his estate, the team had made some remarkable discoveries. James's mother Alice was killed in a train crash when he was just 9, and his uncle Robert, known as Billy Joyce, was a world-famous wrestler. But nothing had yet led to his heirs. When researching James's aunts and uncles on his maternal family tree, the team had found that Joseph and May had died. But they'd hit a stumbling block with Elizabeth.
Alex, what did you find when you started to research James's Aunt Elizabeth's stem, you call it, isn't it?
It is, yes. What we discovered was that she married Richard Gaskell in 1927, and that they had 3 children, 3 daughters. One of whom, Joan, we were able to establish quite quickly had died in infancy in 1929. But one of the particular branches of the family was causing us quite a lot of problems. That was May Gaskell.
Right, OK. So what were the problems?
Well, the problem was, although we knew when she was born, we couldn't find an obvious marriage record for her. We obtained quite a lot of marriage certificates, but none of them were correct, didn't have the right father on it. So we looked for a spinster death for her, and again, we couldn't find that. What we do then, we kind of sort of speculate, and we think to ourselves, did this person add a middle name, perhaps? So then what we did, we then applied for more marriage certificates with any May Gaskell in the area around Wigan, where we knew they were from, with middle initials.
And what did you find?
Well, we were lucky we got one that was correct, and here it is.
And you got the certificate. Ah, she's May Jean Gaskell. That's right. What threw you, isn't it?
She married a man called Donald Jean Woodall in 1952.
He's American?
He is, yeah. He was in the Air Force.
So what next?
Well, next from this will be to look to see if they had any children together.
Yeah.
Did they? Well, no, they didn't. We searched the records and we couldn't find any record of any births at all from her. So then the next step, obviously, is then to look for her death record.
Or to make sure that if she's alive,
Indeed.
She's an heir.
Indeed, she would be, you're quite correct. So then we found the death record here, and obviously it found something quite, quite shocking, as you can see.
Well, that's her.
It is.
May Jean Woodall. And the cause of death. Collision of train. She was in a train crash. Look.
She was.
She broke her neck. Fracture, dislocation of cervical vertebrae in a train crash.
Yeah.
Well, James's mother died in a train crash.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, too much of a coincidence. They must have both died in the same crash.
Yes, they did die in the same train crash. A real family tragedy. But the thing is, there was far worse to follow.
The train crash that took the lives of both James's mother and his aunt was the largest civilian rail disaster that Britain's ever seen. It happened on a foggy morning on the 8th of October 1952 at Harrow and Wealdstone station in northwest London.
3 trains were involved in the Harrow and Wealdstone rail disaster. The first one was an express train coming down from Perth in Scotland on its way to Euston. The second was another express that was coming up from Euston to Manchester. And the third was a regular commuter train that was coming from Tring into Euston. So at about 8:20 that morning, the Tring train was actually stopped in Harrow station and picking up passengers. Whilst it was there, suddenly the Perth train came screaming through. It managed to miss all 3 signals on the approach to the station and still travelling at about 50 miles an hour. At that speed, it went straight into the back of the Tring train that was stopped at the platform. Instantly, the last 3 carriages of that train were telescoped together, and they fell onto the track next to it. Now, the unfortunate thing, and what made Harrow such a disaster, was that was the exact moment as the Manchester Express train was coming up from the other direction. So it slammed straight into the wreckage of the commuter train, and that increased the number of casualties exponentially.
James's mother Alice and his cousin May Jean were both on that fateful train that had set off from Perth in Scotland. But there was even more tragedy. They were also travelling with Alice's siblings, May, James and Robert, the famous wrestler, and May Jean's husband, Donald. May Jean was expecting the couple's first child. Keith Cheney, along with his friend, was one of around 800 passengers on the train from Tring, which the Perth train crashed into. They were among the lucky ones who were travelling in the front of the train and avoided the worst of the impact.
First thing we knew that something was up was the train was just about to start, As I recall it, it had taken its brakes off, and then there was an almighty bang, and the train shunted forward with a jolt, which meant that people standing sort of fell over into the people who were sitting.
I looked up and looked to my left and just saw immediately there was another train whizzing by on the left-hand side in the opposite direction. And then there was another huge crash and the train started shaking again. A gentleman said, "Get out quickly," and we all then got out onto the platform.
The scene of the accident was a mass of twisted metal and wood. I mean, the impact itself was so loud that local residents described it as if it was like a bomb going off.
James's mother Alice and cousin May Jean were killed in the accident. His aunt May was injured and his uncles James and Robert survived. In fact, Robert, the famous wrestler, was a hero that day, pulling injured passengers from the wreckage.
By the time the dust had settled on the accident itself, already 90 people were dead. That total would actually rise to about 112, with about 344 injured.
Keith and Doris both know how lucky they were that morning.
Very few, if any, in the back two coaches had survived. We realised just that we were saved from death by being in the front.
I thought there, but for the grace of God go I, because I could so easily have been on the back of the train, and I certainly wouldn't be here now if that had happened.
In the office, the details of the accident made for shocking reading.
How could anyone come out of that alive? You try and picture our family coming out of that. Some of them did. Unfortunately, James's mother and cousin didn't.
It's amazing anyone made it out alive.
And that's where our wrestler, Billy Joyce, was helping.
The tragedy that befell James's family that day gave Alex and the team more clues in their search for heirs of his estate. With news that his cousin May Jean had died in the train crash, and knowing that she'd had no children, they could now end her line on the family tree. The team was sad to learn that so many family members lost their lives in the train disaster, but the discovery of why they were all together would reveal more clues that could lead them to an heir.
What did you find out about why James's family were all on this fatal train heading south?
Well, we looked into this and we had to sort of piece it together. And what we discovered is that all the family were on the same train going to see James's uncle, also called James, he was James Robinson, to see them off from Southampton because James was leaving with his wife to America.
And how did you establish that?
Well, we managed to find this record here. It's a passenger list of James Robinson leaving, and as you can see the date here, it's the 8th of October 1952.
The same day as the crash?
The very same day.
On the Cunard Queen Elizabeth?
That's right.
The old Queen Elizabeth? Where are they on this?
They're here.
Ah, and there are their names, but they've got lines through them, which presumably means they never made it. They never got on board that ship. Were they on the train? Did they die too?
Well, we weren't sure. Did they pass away in the crash as well themselves? We didn't know. So we did some more investigating and some more research, and what we actually discovered is they did survive, and James did make it out to America eventually. He actually, here's the next passenger list in March.
Also the Queen Elizabeth, yeah.
And here is James Robinson there.
Yeah.
Going out to America.
With a tick against his name.
That's right, so he made it. And what this obviously meant was we needed then to do research in America to try and find if James had
You have to follow that line of inquiry across the Atlantic
we did,
too.
We did, yeah.
Looking for the heir.
That's right.
With James's uncle James's stem now handed over to the team across the pond, the team in Wigan moved on to the remaining stems of the maternal family tree in their final attempts to find heirs.
Our last hopes really were with Joyce, and Joyce we discovered married in 1959 to David Knight. She passed away in 2015, so again we didn't know if there were going to be any heirs on this branch of the family, but we did the research and we discovered that she'd actually had 4 children, these being Jean, Darren, Philip and Paul. Paul had passed away in 1981, But one of those children, one of the heirs, Philip Knight, lived just round the corner from the Wigan office.
Finally, a living heir, and unusually one who knew the dead man. Phil Knight has good memories of his cousin James, or Jimmy as he called him.
For me, it was always Uncle Jimmy. Even though him and my mum were cousins, it was a loss to me. It was like, you know, he was an institution. He was just always there. As far as Jimmy's character goes, you know, it'd be funny if you tried to have a conversation with Jimmy. To be you get a number of responses. Jimmy, how are you feeling today? Yes, indeed. Jimmy, what do you think about this? Jimmy, do you like this? Do you like such a thing? You're like, yes. And that's really the toll. But that was all right because he was happy.
As close as he was to his Uncle Jimmy, Phil wasn't expecting to hear from the heir hunters or to inherit from his cousin.
The guy I'd rung up was asking about Jimmy and relatives. It was a surprise, but it brought back some good memories, some sad ones as well.
One of Phil's most vivid memories is hearing about the impact the Harrow and Wealdstone train disaster had on Jimmy and the rest of his family.
Of course, Jimmy's, you know, biggest tragedy, losing his mum. My mum's job was to look after Jimmy. And with my mum losing a sister in the train disaster, and this had drawn them together.
With Phil and his siblings named as heirs, the last stem to look at was James's uncle Robert, the wrestler known as Billy Joyce. And from his line, the remaining maternal heir in this country was found.
We discovered that he'd married Edna Austin in 1945 and had had a daughter who's aged 71 and is still alive.
Robert's daughter Dorothy, along with Phil Knight, his two surviving siblings and his nephew, completed the known maternal heirs, with research still ongoing in America. And in the Wigan office, a number of paternal heirs were unearthed too.
In total, we discovered that there were 11 paternal heirs, and in total on the maternal side, 5 heirs.
In the States, research is ongoing, but the team there have located at least 5 maternal heirs, possibly a 6th, making a grand total of 21 or 22 heirs who would inherit from James Cheetham's estate.
The value of this estate is quite low, it's only £17,000, and that won't involve any property, it'll just mainly be cash in the bank.
What a journey the team had to go on to find James Cheetham's beneficiaries. His story included both tragedy and triumph, and I'm sure it's a case the heir hunters will never forget.
It has been quite a long case to try and finalise, but in total it's been a rewarding case, not from the monetary side of it. It wasn't a huge estate, but the fact that we could unearth the stories about Billy Joyce and the train disaster is very fulfilling.
And for James's cousin Phil, it's not only been a chance to remember James, he's also benefited from his estate and has already got plans for his inheritance.
When I talked to my son about Jimmy, I said to him, why don't we go to Blackpool for the weekend? I couldn't think of any better way to sort of like say farewell to him and remember him. And it's like this weekend's on Jimmy, which I thought would be lovely and a fitting end and respectful.
I'm at heir hunting firm Finders International in London, where senior case manager Amy and the team are working on the competitive case of John Donahe, who died in Leeds on the 7th of July 2017, leaving no will and with no known next of kin. Thought to be a property owner, John's estate could be of great value. He's missed by his lifelong friend, Bernard Capitano.
I had a lot of time for him. A really lot of time for him, honestly. Even though he was a loner, I seem to see, I would say probably more than anybody of him, unless when he was working. Very nice guy.
With the surname of Donahe, Amy took a gamble by kicking off research on John's paternal family tree in Ireland before all the relevant certificates had come in. However, the late arrival of his father's death certificate has revealed that he wasn't born in Ireland as Amy had thought. causing a massive setback.
It's a huge disappointment. The whole problem was that Donaghy was spelt differently on this Scottish birth record. There was an additional E in the surname, which meant that on our original search a few days ago, we just didn't pick it up. Very annoying, though.
This was a big blow for Amy, not what she needs when working on a competitive case. But the discovery that John's father was born in Scotland doesn't mean discounting the Irish research.
The Scottish team have looked at the birth record in detail, and that record confirms that John Joseph was the son of Joseph Donaghy and Bridget Maguire, and that they were married in County Tyrone in Ireland. So although John Joseph was born over in Scotland, it still appears that we're dealing with an Irish family. This just adds an extra complication, really, because we're having to almost double the research.
So with 3 teams on the job in London, Scotland and Ireland, news is now coming in thick and fast.
The Scottish office confirmed that aside from the birth certificate that they have for John's father, there are no other likely records there that link to this family. The Irish office, however, have had much more success. It looks as though after John Joseph was born in 1915, Joseph and Bridget, the paternal grandparents, went back home to County Tyrone and proceeded to have several more children. At the moment, we have a paternal family tree with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 potential aunts and uncles to look into.
Finally, signs that Amy may be on her way to finding beneficiaries of John Donahy's estate. If his many aunts and uncles had had children, there could be many potential heirs. And after the earlier setback, Amy, with all the certificates now in, starts going down the stems on the paternal family tree. She begins with Margaret Elizabeth Donaghy, John's aunt, and before long, she's got some positive news.
I found a matching death record for Margaret, and it appears that she married a gentleman by the name of William Patrick Doyle over in Ireland. They then came here to England, to Birmingham, in fact, settled, and it looks as though they have had at least 1 daughter, perhaps 3.
And when Amy rings her first potential paternal heir, she's hoping it's going to be good news to make up for the earlier setback and put her ahead of the competition.
It's to do with the Donaghy surname. Do you recognise that? Right, OK. And would that be in connection with your cousin John? Yes, OK. Thank you very much for your time. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you. Bye-bye. I've just spoken with a lady who turns out to be a paternal cousin of John's. It sounds as though she was contacted fairly recently by one of our competitors.
This is not the news that Amy was hoping to hear.
I know that had we not had the issue in receiving the death certificate for John's father, we probably would have been a lot further ahead today than we are now.
With numerous leads now coming in from Scotland and Ireland, there's still a chance that Amy and the team can sign some of the beneficiaries of John's estate ahead of the competition.
Maybe play around with the...
But they're going to have to act quickly and decisively. So it's all hands to the pump, and researcher Camilla is asked to take over looking into John's aunt, Gladys.
She marries a man called Percy Waite, and it looks like they have 7 children together. So obviously that's quite a few cousins that we've located for the deceased. Then I'm going to make a few phone calls and get in contact with the beneficiaries.
The pressure is now on. Picking up on some clever leads, Camilla's managed to find details of one of Gladys's descendants, her granddaughter, and has a phone number for her. It's important she can arrange a meeting with a travelling researcher to confirm this unusual family tree.
She'd be welcome to another visit from another one of our representatives, if possible. OK, that's great. Thanks for your time. Thanks, bye.
As results begin to come in, Amy's feeling positive.
It's quite exciting to know that everything's actually starting to happen.
And Amy's managed to get a lead of her own that could be key to finally cracking the case and signing an heir. She's picking up on the stem of John's uncle Harry, the greyhound trainer, to see if he has descendants who would be John's heirs.
Now, he was born in 1901, and I've managed to find a record for him on the 1939 register. Aside from a full date of birth for Harry, tells me that he was a cafe owner by 1939, that he was married to a lady named Lily. Harry and Lily had two sons, Harry and a younger son named Walter. Walter unfortunately passed away when he was just 3 years old, but Harry survived into adulthood, married a lady named Mary, and had 3 children of his own.
These 3 children are John Donahe's heirs. One of them, Harry Dickinson, not only carries the family name, but also runs the family cafe his grandfather Harry, the greyhound trainer, opened in Goole. Harry wasn't expecting a visit from Amy's travelling researcher.
Initially, when I got the first knock on the door, and I opened the door, the guy that was there, I thought he was here to tell me something. We came in and started chatting about relatives that I had and that I could remember that I had. But unfortunately, the guy that is deceased, I didn't know him. My grandfather moved out here from Leeds, whereas initially the family was all in Leeds, and he moved out here to Goole. And from them, that's how he lost touch with his initial family. We knew he had 3 brothers, and we thought he had a sister, but now, since we've heard all this, we found out that he had 3 sisters as well, so we're learning all the time.
Back in the office, it's been a hard-fought case, but it was worth it.
The research into John Donaghy's family tree, on both the paternal and maternal sides of his family, has been particularly difficult. Aside from that, though, we can look upon this one as quite a positive case to have worked. We have managed to find over 39 potential heirs.
And it turns out that John Donahe's heirs will be getting a share in what promises to be a rather valuable estate.
It looks as though John Donaghy probably owned the property he was living in, and if so, that property is worth in the region of £130,000.
For John's cousin and heir, Harry Dickinson, hearing from the heir hunters was completely unexpected and has given him a family history he never knew about.
It makes you realise that how little you did know about your past family and what they did, but it makes you, when you do begin to find out, it makes you want to know more that what he's done and what they have done and where they live their lives and how they live their lives.
What a tricky case John Donaghy's turned out to be, spanning 3 countries and throwing up false leads on the way. Still, you reap what you sow, and in the end, both the heir hunters and the heirs got their just rewards. Well, with the doors closed on another case, what next for the heir hunters? Maybe it could be you getting an unexpected knock on the door. Until next time, goodbye.